So let's have the Zeitgeist panel come up. If you could, Ted and Rigo and Dory and Aaron. I asked people that are local. There's the global Zeitgeist, but I've asked them to think about what scares. We always ask this question: what scares us the most and what excites us? And let's just put a Chicago-style focus on that. But as you do, if you could introduce yourself, take a minute so that we know the perspective where you're coming from. Looks like we've got, a fun perspective, a former city ticker tape parade event organizer perspective, now executive club, someone who was managing, and I was told doing very innovative things with the tens of billions that Illinois has, and then Dory seems to have the who's who board, the people that we all want to interact with. So maybe, Dory, you could kick us off. There.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm so sorry. You'll have to ask me the question to make sure I was getting settled. So,
just introduce yourself. The question is, what scares you the most for Chicago and its future, and what excites you the most?
To begin, I'm happy to be here. So I'm Dory McWhorter. I'm the president and CEO of the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago. And since I've only been there a little less than 60 days now, prior to that I was the CEO of the YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago. And prior to that, I'm actually a CPA by background. I was a partner at Crowe Horwath in our risk consulting business. And so just have a sort of a different, I wouldn't say different perspective, but just of different channels of insights, I would say, around the space in Chicago. And Mark, I'm sorry, you're the moderator, so I'm not trying to take your job, but did you want to finish the introductions and come back to the question, or did you want me to just, I feel like I'll be talking a long time without knowing who the rest of the panel is, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, why don't you just introduce yourself first,
okay,
and then we'll come back to the question.
Okay, great.
All right, I guess that... thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. And welcome for those who are not from Chicago. Welcome to Chicago. With that, my name is Rodrigo Garcia. I am the Chief Investment Officer of a yet-to-be-announced investment company. We're still undisclosed and in stealth mode, but hopefully here in the near future, it will be disclosed shortly. In addition to that, though, I was a former chief investment officer for the state of Illinois, where I deployed about $44 billion in assets across a number of different asset classes. I also sit as the chair of the investment committee for Oculus Investors. I also sit as chair of the investment committee for the endowment at Northeastern Illinois University. I also sit on two other endowments, Leadership Greater Chicago, and then also for the endowment at Youth Guidance. So lots of investment background, and look forward to having a great conversation here this afternoon. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Erin Roberts. I'm the Chief Partnership Officer at the Executives Club of Chicago. For those who aren't local and don't know the Exec Club, we are a 110-year organization that works with businesses. We consider ourselves the nexus to bring businesses together, to help you guys collaborate, work together, learn from the greatest minds, and move your businesses and each other and the whole city forward. And before that, I did work for the City of Chicago on major festivals, strategic partnerships, so I got to work on the Cubs ticker tape parade, which is what he referenced. And I'm excited to be here and have conversations with all of you and see how we can be of service.
And a fellow Denison alum.
And a fellow Denison alum.
Hello, everyone. Ted Koenig, CEO of Monroe Capital. Monroe Capital is an asset management firm here in Chicago. We manage about $11 billion. We've got about 520 companies in our portfolio. I've been doing that for about 22 years. Prior to that, I was a lawyer at Winston & Strawn, so this is a near and dear to me, the firm. I'm on a number of boards in Chicago, charitable boards, Northwestern Hospital, Allendale School, and a number of other things as well. So I'm excited to be here, and nice to see everyone.
Great. So we have these different perspectives. Dory, you want to lead off. You can answer what scares and excites in one question, but you can also separate it. It's your call.
Sure. And I guess I should add a couple other hats. Listening to the rest of the panelists, I also sit on the board of William Blair Funds, as well as the Chicago Skyway, which is the largest public-private partnership from an infrastructure perspective of we own the bridge that goes between Indiana and Chicago, and then Lifeway Foods from a public company perspective. And I say all that because I think, as I think about what excites and I find the most challenging in the Chicago area is that the fact that I do believe that is, even if you hear across the panel, I'm not sure you'll hear the rest of today, that we just have a really unique opportunity here in Chicago. I think that the way we do things, and I know many of you, some of you are from Chicago, some of you are not, I do claim Chicago as the greatest place on earth in the center of the universe. And part of that is because we do have such a great representation of opportunities and challenges, right? From an opportunity perspective, I do think that from a civic engagement standpoint, Chicago just does an amazing job, and you'll hear probably from Aaron as well, and Rodrigo and Ted, just how the city comes together to address its challenges. So the question is, why do we still have so many challenges, right? As we do think about all the opportunities and the ways that people are willing to cross-sector come together and work on these things and literally think about how we can be innovative in addressing some of these things. I should say when I was at the YWCA, we were the first nonprofit to launch an exchange-traded fund on the New York Stock Exchange for women's empowerment. Rodrigo sits on our impact investing advisory council. And that's just one example of how just leveraging different knowledge and sectors that we were looking to create change for women, not only in Chicago, but across the country. I would say, too, specifically in Chicago, whenever you think about the challenges, I put it in sort of, I frame it with that if there is a gap that's happening, it's happening here in Chicago, right? So, so whether we're talking about an achievement gap relative to education, a wealth gap relative to economic opportunity, and we unfortunately, we have a death gap that just a few miles, you have such a shortage or reduced life expectancy if you're African American from where others live. And so we have all of the gaps, I think, that people name and claim. But what I think what's making us unique is that we are looking at all of those things from a very innovative and multi-sector approach. So from an achievement gap perspective, I think there's some things on the horizon. I can't fully say today, but I think there's some things on the horizon that's going to allow us to really address and lean in how do we create educational opportunities for all the young learners in Chicago, and what does that look like. So I think that's one issue area that's being looked at and addressed. I think on the wealth gap, we now have our Chicago Community Trust is an organization that's looking, created a group called Together We Rise to look at how do we sort of restart after COVID and being able to address these issues head on. And then on the death gap side, you see that there's a group called West Side United that's looking at how do we ensure that the residents on the West Side don't experience this decreased life expectancy just because they live in a different zip code. And you see that as a combination of healthcare professionals, business professionals, and nonprofits that are looking to come together to make sure that that issue is addressed. So I'd say that the challenges are vast here, but I do think it's almost like I will go so far as to say it's almost like our Chicago fire moment, where things with COVID, I just really think accelerated so many of the issues that we all knew existed. And now we really have a time to take a step back and say, hey, how can we address that differently, just like we did in 1871 when Chicago reemerged and really became, I would say, a greater city because of the challenges it has to address. And I still am so happy that we don't have to put our garbage in the street, that we have alleys because of the Chicago fire, unlike New York, sorry. So that's all I'll say to that.
All right. So, look, it's great that I'm no longer in public service because I don't have to run everything that I have to say through my communications shop. So, so this is what, right now, if you're looking at the city of Chicago and and the broader metropolis, there are certain things that it has going for it. Number one, we still, the city of Chicago continues to attract a number of Fortune 500 companies, not just from the suburbs, from across the Midwest and across the U.S., and even in the companies that are coming from overseas. Now, why are they coming to Chicago and continuing to come here? Well, it's because the cost of living continues to be cheaper relative to our friends on the coast, i.e. San Francisco, LA, New York, and Boston. B, we tend to have a high concentration of an educated workforce. We have, I believe, the highest degree per capita in terms of bachelor's degree than any other large city in the United States. We also tend to have, obviously, world-class universities in the University of Chicago, Northwestern, as well as the University of Illinois system, which is inclusive of Champaign and Chicago. You continue to have this great civic engagement that Dory mentioned. You know, I split half my time between Chicago and Miami now, and I can tell you that in every other city that I've lived on, I've never seen anything like Chicago, and how it is an expectation, almost like a requirement, a soft requirement, that if you're going to be a leader in academia, in government, in corporate Chicago, that there's an expectation that you be involved and give back, you know, to the Chicagoan society. And a lot of it gets its roots back in terms of what happened after the Great Fire of 1871. And then also, obviously, culture. After New York, we tend to have the largest number of cultural activities, from theater to our museums, to the lakefront, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of a few things that has going for us. And contrary to popular belief, the Chicago metropolis is growing. The state of Illinois lost a little bit of population. It was like 20,000, so it was nominal, but it was concentrated in central and southern Illinois, which is where the exodus is occurring, mostly due to the loss of the manufacturing base that has left the U.S. and continues to do, or it's either becoming much more tech-centric and moving into metropolises where these type of individuals tend to be credentialed and or have advanced educational skills. And so Chicago, it actually grew overall as a metropolis. So those are all the things that it has going for it. Now, what are some of the challenges? Because Chicago, like any other large city, does not escape without its own challenges. Number one is probably one that we're all aware of, or you probably have heard of, which is its financial position. Its financial position continues to slowly and incrementally get better, but it's still one that I would say took 20 to 30 years to get into this, current position. That it's probably going to take 20 to 30 years to formally get out. And so, and unlike the state, which has broad taxing powers across the board, the city of Chicago does not. And so anything that it tries to do, it has to go out and get permission from the state to be able to tax certain things. And so that's the first piece. The second piece is that's the revenue side. The expense side is obviously currently being weighed down by defined benefit plans, i.e. Public pensions. The former mayor, Mayor Emanuel, brokered a compromise with some of the labor unions that it was a trade-off. Unfortunately, that was struck down by the Illinois Supreme Court. So it's not like, many of our elected officials haven't tried, both at the city and state level, to try to, rein this in, but the courts have said that is not a viable solution. So I won't get into the specifics, but that continues and will continue to be a challenge, at least for the next 10 to 15 years, once the funding ratio, based on their current plans, crosses the 65% threshold, and it starts moving to be a much more solidified position. And then the other two pieces that I would just mention briefly is, the disparity. Dory covered this appropriately, so I won't get much more into detail, but that disparity continues to hit home here in Chicago. You just have to look at the south side and the west side and compare it to the north side, and you can see the very affluent, and that extends into the suburbs. Look at the south and near west suburbs like Maywood, and compare that to the north suburbs, and you can see the same disparities, and not even worse, because they don't have the broad diversified tax base that the city of Chicago does. And then lastly is an issue that is much more recent, and continues to be a piece here in Chicago is how do we, even though we've seen a certain type of offenses continue to decline, there still continues to be a perception, whether justified or not, that there tends to be an uptick in crime in the downtown area specifically, which ultimately takes on, we'll say, the attention of many more individuals, and you kind of gets a lot more media coverage. Ultimately, if you look at the stats, I'm one to say that there is a marginal increase, but it's not a statistically significant increase, in my opinion. I think if anything, it's just probably it's escaping neighborhoods that usually don't get the attention, and it's now moving much more into the mainstream, and that is why it's becoming much more, attention grabbing. With that, I will leave it there.
You're going to think that we planned this, and we did not. I wrote down a lot of the same things, and the first thing that came to mind is, what excites me is that Chicago has a legacy of comebacks, and I wrote down, the 1871, Great Chicago Fire happened, and, on the backs of that, we were able to rebuild smarter and better. I worked for the 100-year anniversary of the Plan of Chicago, so the 1909 Plan of Chicago, which was written by Daniel Burnham, and a lot of people don't know that he actually wrote city plans for San Francisco and for Cleveland and other cities that never quite materialized. The difference was here in Chicago, the business community really got behind and subscribed. There were 236 subscribers to the Plan of Chicago, and they really took it upon themselves to say, if this is going to come into fruition, we really need to be the ones to lead that, to guide that, to make it happen. And so they work together. So there's this amazing civic spirit in Chicago that really excites me, and it's what I see every day when I'm at the Executives Club, and really like about that experience. And when I was talking about, I look at challenges as opportunities. So a lot of the challenges, the wealth gap and stuff like that, is an opportunity. It's a way to build and fix and make Chicago better. And so, at the Executives Club, we've been hosting a lot of those conversations on the We Rise Together, which is with the Chicago Community Trust. And there's also about 30 companies currently involved with that, and maintaining that conversation, driving those, not just the conversation, but action forward. What is it going to take? How does everybody come together? How can we really make things happen? We've also been having a lot of conversations around tech and innovation. There's a lot of opportunity in the city in that space. So we've been working with P33, which is kind of a group that's really helping to attract the tech talent back here to Chicago. And there's a lot of tech businesses being started up here. And I think another area of opportunity is around manufacturing and supply chain, because we are in the Midwest, because a lot of things move through here. We also have a lot of space for things to grow. You guys took a tour of the south side this morning, so I think you can see that there's a lot of places where investment could come, where businesses could come and take up shop and really start to drive things forward. So.
Thank you. There's an advantage to going last because you get to listen to everybody else. So I learned a couple of things. Number one, Dory, why are there still potholes on the tollway between Illinois and Indiana?
Not on the Skyway.
That's a problem. Number two, I'd hate to think that we need another fire to burn the city down to make things better here. So I'm going to be less politically correct than the other panelists, because I'm not running an organization or managing endowments for the state or the city, or a great organization like the YMCA. I'm a business guy, and my job is to make shit happen and get things done. We built a great firm in Chicago, and I owe everything that I have to the city of Chicago and the people of Chicago. I don't have one thing. I've got a list, and I'll give you my list of, start with the things that are good and the things I really appreciate. Chicago is one of the most connected cities in the country. We have offices in New York, Boston, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Atlanta, and Seoul, Korea. And of all those cities, Chicago is the most connected. It's the most interconnected. People that do business and are in business are cross paths with more people that do business and are in business in Chicago than any other city. New York is limited and it's fractured by what region of the city you're in, by what area you're in, west side, east side, uptown, downtown, and there's no organizations like the Executives Club or some of the other ones that bring people together. So that's a great advantage for Chicago. Number two, as one of the other panelists said, the business community really is indebted to being here in Chicago and to giving back. Never seen a city where there's a culture of giving and a culture of support. Going back to the days of the last generation of leaders, Norm Bobbins and some of the other really top execs in town, some of the corporate leaders, we're very focused on giving back and doing the right thing. That doesn't happen in a lot of cities. You go to LA, San Francisco, Atlanta, everyone is out to do the right thing for themselves, not for the city. So those are a huge advantage. The financial services community in this town is very strong. We've had historically independent local banking institutions, which is rare. We've had American National Bank for years, which was part of J.P. Morgan. We had LaSalle Bank, Harris Bank. These organizations were community sensitive. They were sponsoring community activities. They were bringing community organizations in neighborhoods. They were giving. There was a lot of invest at home, and that was a real difference from other cities. It was mentioned earlier, the employment pool. Chicago has the largest and deepest employment pool in a lot of areas, whether it's tech, whether it's finance, whether it's accounting, PE. There's a lot of people that are involved in different industries that make money, which is a good thing because that money tends to get back in circulation in town. Educational institutions, you guys raised it. University of Chicago, Northwestern, IIT. People don't mention IIT very much, but it's the Staten Island of most cities, universities. It takes all types, black, brown, yellow, orange, you name it, you go to IIT and you see an educational institution that doesn't discriminate based upon, race, religion, color, or anything else. And they do a great job. University of Chicago, Northwestern, University of Illinois, we've got a wonderful university system in town. So those are all the things that, if you sum it all up, the one word that comes to mind is potential. Chicago has, with all these great things going for it, a lot of potential. The other side of the ledger, though, is scary, as far as I'm concerned. We talked about it. Crime, it's out of control, as far as I'm concerned. You shouldn't have carjackings in the city. You shouldn't have, Michigan Avenue shouldn't be boarded up. Rush Street shouldn't be boarded up. Your highest tourist areas, it should be a place where people come, visit, tour, shop, spend money here. Those are all things that should be happening. And, I'm not happy about it that it isn't the case. 5 years ago, there wasn't an empty store on Michigan Avenue. Now, you look and there's empty stores up and down the Gold Coast. Number two is, after crime, is this whole pension discussion we've had. It's crazy. We are the worst state in the country in terms of unfunded obligations. Those are obligations like your checkbook. Think about it, you have a checkbook, you have money coming in, money going out.
New Jersey's right behind you.
New Jersey's right behind us, and that's as screwed up as anywhere. But it's 40%, almost 40% of every tax dollar that we pay in on a state basis goes to pay pension benefits. And I'm not, here to tell you whether they're too high or too low, or they're deserved or not deserved. There is no way, when we've had a zero cost of living, that inflation over the last 10 years or so, that the pension funds automatically should get a 3% increase every year. We all don't get that. Our kids don't get that. But pensioners get a 3% annual increase that over time doubles the cost of the pensions. So something's got to be done. Prior administrations tried to deal with it. The courts shut it down because the courts decided that it was a constitutional right to have this. Great. When we're bankrupt, there's no more constitutional rights because you can't pay for that. At some point, we have to figure that out, and it's going to take a lot of give and take by both sides, but we've got to deal with that. You can't have 40% of your GDP in a state go to cover pensions because it crowds out spending for police, fire, education, and lots of other things. So, taxes. Chicago is the highest tax city in the country. Highest. Not necessarily real estate taxes. There, we're only second highest. But sales tax, cable tax, sewer tax, TV tax, pharmaceutical tax, liquor tax, we add it all up, we are the highest tax city in the country. And that's a scary thought. You never want to be the number one in that area. Education, we've got to reform education. There's 340,000 kids that are in public schools today. There were 500,000 kids in public schools 10 years ago. What does that tell you? We have a problem. And those kids need to get jobs. They need to get higher education. And Dory mentioned that, we're working on some things to make that happen, at least to relieve some of the pressure. But, that's got to get fixed. So it all comes down to kind of one word, like I said before, potential on the good side. On the bad side, I think it's leadership. We need leadership. And that's what I believe, in my opinion, again, not describing this to anybody else, what the city is lacking today. Lacking good, strong leadership to help us solve these problems. These are not endemic problems. It's been created over the last 20, 30 years, I agree. But if we take the attitude that it's not fixable, it's been around forever, it existed long before I was here, it's going to exist long after I'm here, that's not the way you solve problems. Solve problems by being bold and being brave and doing what needs to be done, irrespective of the political consequences, which our leaders can't somehow get out of the way of, and figure that out. So that's kind of my unvarnished view of good and bad in Chicago.
That was pretty good. Great panel. We have no time for questions. No, sorry. Again, we'll make time. So, such great perspectives. Who has a question? Just Preet. As you, what? Okay, just as you wish. Maybe introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm just Preet from Washington, D.C., and I just want to give a shout-out to everyone from Chicago here, all of you on the panel. When I first moved to America, I moved to Chicago. And till date, I have more friends in Chicago than anywhere else because you're the warmest people. In spite of the cold city, the warmest people are. And I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. Until date, I miss it. My big question, when I moved to Chicago the first time, I'd heard about Chicago, the crime and whatnot, and then at the same time, it's beautiful. But it's still there. Like, it's not news. So, and I totally agree with you. Sorry, I don't know your name in the corner, about the leadership. Totally agree with you. But it's the same type of people that keep getting in the leadership roles. So how will it change now? Like, what are we doing that's different? Or what will you do that's different?
Cut at it and you guys jump in. Unfortunately, and this is a hard thing to admit, is that Chicago deserves some of the pain because of the way our systems are set up. It's a one-party, basically a one-party city. You have no real choice because once the machine, the Democratic machine gets behind a candidate in Chicago, it's not like in other cities where you have voting, where the top vote getter wins. What happens is the top vote getter that's been put up by the Democrats win. There's very few Republicans that have ever won an election in Chicago. And what happens is that it causes power to be concentrated in a small handful of people. And those people tend to pick successors and successors of successors and successors of them. And it's very hard to move the needle. We had a crime problem, let's call it, in Chicago. We had a court problem. We had a prosecution problem. We had a lot of publicity around this Jussie Smollett thing. And we had a race that at first looked like it was going to be competitive in the state's attorney. And the mayor came out and said the state's attorney's not doing her job. You're not prosecuting people. We're not putting the Chicago police director came out and said that the state's attorney's not doing her job by prosecuting people. What happened? State's attorney won. And whether it's good or bad, same state's attorney won, and she felt empowered to continue to do what she's doing. So until there's voting changes and there's a real election choice, it's not going to change. That's what happened with why we're in the pension crisis we're in. The political leaders pandered to their supporters, which were a lot of the unions, and I'm telling you, I'm not anti-union at all, but they pandered to the unions, and in order to get votes, they kept giving more and more and more to the unions each time, and that's why we're in the position we're in. Anyway, you guys can take it. I'm passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of things. I mostly agree with Ted. I have some slightly different views, but I do believe there is a certain lack of leadership on many fronts. Because if you look at the reason why the pensions are here, and there's think tanks on the left and there's think tanks on the right. I pay attention to the ones that are right in the middle that don't have. You look at their contributions and you can see who tends to fund them, and you can see that 2/3 of the reason we're in this issue is because our leaders did not fully fund those pensions, both on the Republican and the Democratic side. And those are Republican governors and Democratic governors. And I say that because if we were just fund those pensions as we were supposed to in the 90s and the early 2000s, we would be we wouldn't be at 90%, but we would be in the high 60s. Most people fail to realize the state of Illinois still had its pensions funded in the 60s, in the early 2000s. But instead of us making the right decision and either A, increasing taxes, or B, cutting social services, most people are like, we're just going to take a pension holiday. And so we, as a populace, did not make our leaders accountable. Instead of making the right decisions and having conviction in their decisions, they said, we're going to go ahead and take the easy way out. We're not going to piss off our constituents. We're not going to piss off our supporters. And therefore, they start taking a number of pension holidays. That's the first piece. The second piece that I would address is, in Illinois, unfortunately, we have the highest number of governments than any other state by far. We have 7,000 governments in the state of Illinois. The next runner-up is Pennsylvania at 4,000. And then the next one after that is Texas at 12 or 1,300. And so if you look at the delta between us and the next two, it is massive. Why do I say that? Because that creates all these governance issues that Ted was alluding to. It creates overhead that is unnecessary. And why do we have them, and why can't we get rid of them? Well, because they tend to be often an area where, elected officials or others tend to put their supporters, and you end up with this, kind of scratch my back, I'll scratch yours issue. So I do think that there's a significant amount of issues there. And then the second piece, though, that I would mention, look, Chicago, for all the great things, it's also a very, very segregated city. And so I've never seen a city so segregated compared to other cities. And I was born here. I was raised here. And so I know the ins and outs of this city. And so I say that because at the end of the day, the folks that are electing, to the question that was asked, is like, why do we keep electing a lot of these people? Well, at the end of the day, those elected officials, whether we like it or not, are being elected by the full populace. And the populace is not just us in this room. It is people who have felt for way too long that they are not getting opportunity, that they're not getting a chance, that they're not able to mobilize, and so they're going to continue to elect people that they feel are representing their interests, which may or may not be against the interests of those individuals that may or may not be in this room. And that's really the bottom line. And so the key is, how can we find a leadership that represents the best of our city, i.e. what Ted was alluding to, but at the same time is able to bring everyone under the umbrella. And unfortunately, thus far, that leader has not yet been elected. At least that's my perspective.
You asked passionate. You struck some passionate chords here. But would you like to answer that, Dory, or would you like to wait to the next question?
Next question.
I don't know if I can add. She's smarter.
I don't think I can add anything else. Those are great responses.
Oh, okay, unfortunately, we had to keep it going. And Anna, if you could show the the agenda, so that probably would have helped me. I'll try to get us back on track. Any last questions from the? You've asked one already, Bruce. I got it. You got the best question?
Well, I want to give. We want to certainly in this conference talk about solutions, and I think both Dory talked about a solution that she had experience with her organization being able to have a capital activity that was pretty significant. I'd like her to unpack that. But I have to take this time to celebrate Rodrigo for his work with the Treasurer's Office. One of the things we talk about all the time is the limitation of getting equity capital in the hands of diverse investors. And what he was able to do when he was in the state of Illinois with the state of Illinois Treasurer was use public pension dollars in a way that really made a difference. And so I really want to take my hat off to you, and I think everyone in this room must respect when, we talk about problems all the time, very rarely do we see effective solutions. And yet, just like you talked about, those constituencies pay into those pension funds, and then people get to manage those pension funds. But oftentimes, that never ends up coming back to the people that pay into those pension funds, and there's never a way to figure out how to get capital in the hands of innovative and entrepreneurs. What you did that. I celebrate your work, and I hope that you can continue that in your role in the private sector, because that was game-changing activity, and then you and the Treasurer made a real difference. And you also made sure that people that managed the money looked like the people that needed to get access to some of that money. So for the first time, private, diverse fund managers were able to play a role in the equity markets because of your leadership, and I really appreciate it.
Next time, Bruce, I'll have you on the panel. No. One more? Okay.
So, I guess famously, a lot of the Chicago-founded unicorns from many years ago moved to the coasts when they IPO'd or got acquired. There's been a huge increase recently in the early-stage investment dollars in Chicago, which is awesome. I think every month there's another $40 million Series A fund announced. What is Chicago doing to work to sort of retain those companies here and make sure that those jobs go to support Chicago-based teams versus sort of what had historically happened when they moved to the coast?
It has to be a pithy answer, if you could.
Go, Aaron? No, I was just going to speak to a couple things that I know. So Aaron mentioned P33. So P33 was specifically a venture that was, again, cross-sector. I was on the initial committee of that, the business community, the academic community, specifically trying to answer that question and make sure that Chicago was a top-tier tech city. And so I think by having that direct support and investment that's coming from all across Chicago, including the government and the state as well as the city, of course, as well as different business leaders and the nonprofit academic community to adjust that specific thing. And what we've seen so far is that they are able to attract other investors to stay in Chicago, as well as, Chicago is right now being able to tout, too, that it's the #1 city for female-founded investment going into female-founded organizations as well. So I think that people are recognizing that and really spending some effort, and I'm sure that Ted and the fellow panelists could speak more to that as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say 3 quick things. It's talent. Everyone's spoke here about talent from the universities, but University of Illinois is one of the top 5 producers of computer science engineers in the country, and many of them have gone on to start many of the companies that we all know today, like PayPal, Netscape, and so forth and so forth. They came out of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Number 2 is capital. The ability to invest in what I would call more modest valuations compared to the coast continues to attract capital here from the coast. And the third piece is, that we have done a great job of understanding what we're good at and then leveraging that. Logistics and supply chain, Chicago, second to none. Agricultural and food, Chicago, second to none. Quantum, which is its new area that we're moving into, second to none. Everyone talks about great universities. What we also have in Illinois that many other states do not, we not only have 1, but we have 2 national laboratories. There's only like 13 or 14 in the entire country, and we're one of, I believe it's 2 states that have 2 of them, Oregon and Fermilab, and the amount of research that is coming out of those that is ultimately creating all these innovative concepts is what's also driving a lot of this. That is why, one of the things that I did is, when I was at the state, is we ended up deploying $1 billion into venture capital directly just for Chicago. Why? Because I knew that we would be able to capture the upside, and right now our portfolio is returning almost 30%. That's money that goes back into the state, in addition to all the economic traction that we're continuing. For me, that was that's the ultimate private-public partnership, where you're not using your income statements and grants, but you're doing your balance sheet and investing in ways that can continue to foster that ecosystem, create jobs, et cetera, but also a financial return back to the state.
It's hard to follow that. I'm gonna echo what Ted was talking about before. Is the connectedness in Chicago and leaning into that, finding ways, making sure that we're connecting the businesses to all of this wealth of universities and these recent grads. A lot of them would graduate and then head to the coast because that's where they thought that they had to go, and creating more of those connections so that they know that they can stay here where the opportunities are, building the resources in terms of like the innovation hubs and spaces to help startups to navigate through the whole process, and using, kind of leveraging that civic spirit of, the bigger companies helping the smaller ones get going here, to make it a little bit more affordable, approachable, accessible. So we've been kind of leaning into that and leaning into those areas where we have those opportunities, the kind of logistics, supply chain, biotech. There's a lot of space here for that kind of research in the development here. So.
Quick comment. There's a fundamental rule that innovation and entrepreneurship follows capital. Wherever the capital is, that's where you're going to see a collection of entrepreneurship and innovation. Historically, people felt they had to go to the West Coast. Get this. Then New York and Boston became hubs of innovation, entrepreneurship. Chicago, over the last 5 to 10 years, has emerged as one of the up-and-coming places where investors are, and people are coming to Chicago for family offices, for universities, for venture firms, and other angel groups. And Chicago has a pretty good, we're not there yet, but we got a pretty good subset today, a lot better than 5 years ago, of innovation and entrepreneurship, because there's more capital here now.
That's a good segue. To our panelists, thank you.
Come join our 361 Firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.